Here's how to preserve an open bottle of wine forever and how not to kill your wine just putting it in the fridge. My name is Garry and I'm a WSET 3 qualified sommelier. Let's jump right into it. Let's be honest, the best way to save the wine is to drink the bottle once it's opened in a matter of hours. That can be quite hard if you are enjoying your wine without company, but it's really the best way of preserving all the aromas and flavors as they are in the wine. But here you will probably ask me, Garry, why does wine suffer from storing it in the fridge after it was opened? What's the point? And the point here is oxygen. Have you ever cut an apple and let it lay on the table for a couple of hours? If the answer is yes, you already know what is oxidation. Now, oxygen can be either the best friend or the worst enemy of wine, depending on how and when it contacts wine. Basically, the wine needs oxygen on each stage of its production, but not too much. The basic pattern is the more youthful, fruity and easy drinking wine you want to make, less oxygen should contact the wine. And vice versa, if you want to get something which tastes not exactly like wine, but more like nuts, caramel or toffee, these types of things, probably oxidation is what you need. Why am I talking about nuts and caramel? Just because I've had my breakfast early today and now I want to eat something already? Okay, not only because of that, but also because there are so-called tertiary aromas which occur in the wine exposed to oxygen. But if I just take a random bottle of wine from the supermarket shelf, just open it and expose it to oxygen, will it taste like nuts and caramel? No. Unfortunately, it will taste more like vinegar and will totally lose its floral and fruity aromas. All the characteristics of this wine are made in the winery, or at least before the bottle was opened. When we open a bottle, sometimes we want to aerate the wine a little bit to put it into a decanter, which basically is any vessel with a large surface of contact of wine with air, or we swirl wine in a glass to get a little bit more of air to interact with the wine. A little bit of oxygen before drinking the wine may really be great to open up the aromas, but it doesn't work with all wine. It depends on the style and mostly is true about more complex, older wines with sediment, because by pouring the wine into the decanter, we also make sure that the sediment stays in the bottleneck and doesn't get into our glass. But once the wine was opened, probably after some decanting as well, the best way to treat it is to drink it as soon as possible. But if it's not your plan for today, here are some tips to preserve your wine. If you don't want to drink the whole bottle, probably the best option is to drink as little as possible, so there would be more wine left in the bottle. Because when we reseal the bottle, inside of it we have wine and air, which obviously contains oxygen. And the more air is in the bottle, the more rapid the process of oxidation will be. So in order to prolong the life of a wine, we need to leave as much wine and as little oxygen as possible. Also, there are methods to get rid of oxygen from the bottle completely, but I'll talk a little bit later about that. Anyway, it's not very comfortable to always calculate the amount of wine you want to drink based only on the proportion of wine and air in the bottle which we'll have after the dinner. Sounds quite confusing, right? Now, what can we really do to make a wine last longer? The very least we can do is to put the wine in the fridge. Cooler temperatures lower the oxidation and therefore the wine lasts longer. But really it doesn't help that much, because even if the bottle is half full and it was put in the fridge, it won't last more than a couple of days for white wines and probably 3 days for red wines. And even the next day, the wine in the fridge won't be the same as you've enjoyed it once opened the bottle. And what's the difference? Oh, you'll just smell it and taste it. The wine loses its aromas, it becomes too acidic, alcohol becomes more noticeable. Well, it won't convert wine into poison and it will still be quite drinkable, but definitely not enjoyable. Enjoy? It's the most important part of wine. And here's a couple of tricks to make the wine last longer in the fridge. Way longer. The first, most affordable, very simple but effective way is to just remove oxygen from the opened bottle. You literally pump it out with a small pump through a special rubber cap which inserts in the bottle. You just pump a couple of times and when you hear a click, your wine is resealed. All the air is pumped out. The main advantage of this method is that it's super accessible. This pump costs $15 and you can use it basically forever. When I have an open bottle of wine at home, I use this one and it's really helpful because you can reseal the bottle multiple times and it really slows down the oxidation, but definitely it's not perfect. And the main disadvantage of this pump is that it doesn't stop the oxidation completely. Yes, it pumps out the air, but it cannot remove it completely. It's not vacuum inside the bottle, it's thin air, like thin, but air. It contains some oxygen. So the oxidation slows down, but it doesn't stop. With this pump, the wine will last up to a week in the fridge. Yes, it will still be gradually losing its flavors and aromas, but not as fast as it would just in the bottle in the fridge. Another disadvantage of this method is that we cannot use it with sparkling wines because it will pump out all the saturated CO2 from the bottle as well. So we'll be left with no bubbles. And if a sparkling wine loses bubbles, it leaves with nothing. So no good. There is a way to get rid of oxygen completely, but it also costs more and it is a little bit more complex in usage than this little pump. And the solution is called Coravon. Probably there are other companies in the market as well which produce similar gadgets, but Coravon is definitely one of the most well-known ones. What Coravon is, it's an inert gas system, so it replaces the air inside an open bottle with an inert gas like argon. Argon has no color, no flavor, no taste. It does not oxidize the wine because it doesn't contain oxygen. There are basically two main types of these inert gas systems for wine preserving. The first one works almost just like a little pump in the previous method. There is a rubber cap and a device with a long hollow tube which is inserted into the bottle through it. The capsule with argon is connected to the device, and once you pull the trigger, the argon fills the bottle, pouring your wine into your glass. This method is very useful, but it has one drawback. To insert the thing into the bottle, you have to uncork the wine, and that means a little bit of oxygen will enter the bottle and the oxidation process will inevitably begin. This way we significantly prolong the life of the wine, but we cannot keep it this way forever. After like 3-4 weeks, the wine will inevitably become oxidized because of that first dose of oxygen that it's got. And as you remember in the title, I've promised you to show you the way to preserve your wine forever, and it was not a clickbait. There is another variation of that inert gas system that doesn't require to open a bottle. You just insert a thin needle through the cork, so there is zero oxygen that enters the bottle. If you decide to pull out the needle, the cork will close the gaps left by the needle and the wine will be once again sealed. So far, it's the most advanced system that allows to protect wine for months or even years from oxidation, because basically the wine did not contact the air, and that is why it can last almost forever. And also they have a special system for sparkling wines that adds CO2 into the bottle to reseal it, and that doesn't kill the bubbles in the wine. And probably you wonder which of the methods should you use for your wine at home to preserve it. Well, it really depends, but what I use most of the time is that little pump. It's very affordable, preserves wine for up to 1 week, and it's really what we all need at home because, you know, if you open a bottle of wine, probably you will finish it in the next 5 to 7 days. So no use to buy something more expensive. If you drink half a bottle today and half a bottle the next day, probably you don't need even this pump. You just put the wine in the fridge and it will still be okay. Quite drinkable the next day, but probably it's still better to use the pump just in case you decide not to drink it the next day. If you open several bottles at a time, or you open some expensive wines and want to enjoy them by glasses, you can possibly think of one of the Coravon-like inert gas systems, but they cost from $100 to $500, depends on the model, so you decide whether you want to spend that money on a wine gadget or not. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.